I like to explain to the students in my Scrum classes that we do not get paid to practice Scrum. No? But we get paid to solve our customers' problems within the given constraints while we contribute to the organization's sustainability. I don't understand why people still have this idea that they can hand down a request to the engineers and then expect that exactly the right thing will be built, that is solving a customer problem. This is complete nonsense. What processes are impeding your progress? What processes would you preserve? And what processes would you kill right out of immediately? I always try to tell people, trash bin is your friend. If there's something in your backlog that hasn't been touched for 3 months, you throw it away. Because no one is interested in that. And if it's important, they come back anyway.
Welcome to Untrapping Product Teams. Today is a very exciting and promising episode because we have Stefan Wolpers. He is the writer of the Scrum Anti-Patterns Guide. This is a must-read book for anyone working with Scrum because you are going to discover things that are wrong and you probably don't even know. On top of that, Stefan also writes the newsletter Food for Agile Thought. It is one of the best newsletters you can ever find in this topic because it helps you understand what is wrong so you can fix it. For years, I have been referring to his content. I have quoted him probably dozens of times because his content is on point, easy to understand, and highly valuable. So welcome, Stefan. Glad to have you here.
Thanks a lot, David. Thanks a lot for hosting me. I'm really looking forward to this.
Thank you. So I want to dive a little bit deeper on your book here because it's a very considerable book. As we see, there are many anti-patterns that teams can face. So you took the time to bring all of them here in a concise way. So I'm curious to understand what inspired you to take the trouble of writing a book.
That took a long time, actually. So the origin story of the guide goes back to 2017 when I was freelancing as a Scrum Master for a very large European utility. And I was commuting every Monday and Thursday from Berlin to the Ruhr area. And I started to think about my observations and I started to write blog posts. And then I aggregated the blog post into a little PDF, the Scrum Anti-Patterns Guide version 1, so to speak, and made it available for download. And it proved to be really, really popular. And it took me a few years to think about, hey, why not turn this into a real book? And that happened in 2022. Some may know I'm a professional Scrum trainer with Scrum.org, and Scrum.org at the time had a cooperation with Pearson, with a publishing house, and they have a series called Professional Scrum, and I suggested my anti-pattern guide for this thing, and they said, yeah, let's turn this into a book, and that took about a year from then on.
With an interesting story. So you used the commuting time to come up with blog posts and content and downloaded by 20,000 people. That's quite a lot, quite a number.
Yeah, it is actually. So I think it was a good approach, So rapid prototyping, so to speak, because every blog post I was writing was basically creating a signal. Okay, this is useful. I can apply this in my daily life, and it has benefits for me. And so that was really rewarding, So I never thought about turning this into some sort of money-generating operation or something like that. It was just, for the benefit of all involved, sharing with the community.
Yeah, I benefited a lot. I remember when I started writing, I started a bit later, it was around 2020, and I was reading some of your posts there. Remember looking at where am I screwing up with refinement? So you had there like anti-patterns with refinement, so loads of them, so things like that. And then I start taking the perspective, like for my writing, maybe I could write something, how to run refinements or the common traps with refinements from my perspective. And then I quoted your content because it was very easy to see what I had to change, what people had to, and I connected to that. Some things I had observed, some things I had done. So it's not that I am immune to anti-patterns. I have faced many of them.
Oh, totally. So I'm guilty of a lot of those anti-patterns I described. For a time, I thought it would be funny to play Bob Marley's "Get Up, Stand Up" at the beginning of the daily Scrum, and then I thought, maybe it's not the way it should be.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing we're talking here about anti-patterns. So some people may wonder, what is that? So I want to ask you what it is and why should leaders and product owners bother about it?
So anti-patterns, it's a it, it's a tricky topic. Let me put it this way. So from my perspective, an anti-pattern, first of all, is a potentially harmful behavior, depending on a certain situation and context. Um, the problem is if you're operating in a complex environment, as we typically do, it's not so easy to understand whether a certain behavior is constituting an anti-pattern or it's just a deviation from the norm to adapt to the context. Sometimes you need a bit of tweaking to make things work. Let me give you an example. So if a Scrum Master is running a daily Scrum, allowing developers to talk, this is undoubtedly an anti-pattern. It's not supposed to be that way. So anti-pattern, the daily Scrum serves one purpose, allowing the developers to figure out whether they are on track towards the sprint goal. That's it. Well, let's consider a different situation. Imagine a Scrum team extends a sprint to 3 months in length. If you judge it by the book, by the Scrum Guide, you would say, okay, come on, this is not possible. Scrum Guide clearly states a sprint length is a month long, not longer. But what if they're training a large language model? And what if they tell you, we can't get anything meaningful done within a month? It does not work this way. Is it now still an anti-pattern, or is it just a clever way of adapting an old framework to a new situation? I mean, no one knew about training models in that sense 25 years ago. No one had a clue about this. So this makes the whole topic of anti-patterns a bit more challenging than at first glance. Yes, of course, there are the low-hanging fruits you can immediately pick and say, yeah, it's not supposed to be that way because ABC. But beyond that, you really have to dig into the whole problem. So what is happening? Start with the observation. Then think about it. Okay, why may it be that way it is? There's always a reason why things are the way they are. And there are astonishingly often quite good explanations why the things are deviating from what you would expect to be the correct way of doing things, the right way of doing things. So it's really not that easy.
It's really not that easy. And that's the challenge of digital products, right? So there are things that nobody has ever done it, and how can you have the right way of doing this? So I like what you say about observing, and then you can decide, do you want to keep doing the way we are doing? Is there a better way? Maybe this is the better way right now. It fits us, we are creating value in the end, and so on. So it's about observing. But one thing, teams will realize that some things do not serve them. Some things may get in the way of doing what they mean to achieve. And some of the anti-patterns will be fundamental to get support from the leadership, because without support from the leadership, the teams will struggle to do that. How do you see this situation being solved?
Depends a lot on the context, on the culture of the organization. Let me put it this way: there are moments when you have to choose wisely which battles to pick. There are moments when you can immediately say, okay, this is actually impeding us. However, we won't make any progress here. This is not going to be the hill we decide to die on. On the other side, it helps to actually constantly, try to make progress a little bit until you manage to convince all the others why change is necessary. I think what a lot of people do not understand is that, well, as product people, we are change agents. And I think this is now our number one professional task that we are facing every single day. And change does not come easy. You have to convince people that change is beneficial for them, for whatever reason, that change is beneficial for the whole organization, that it makes a lot of sense to chip in and to continue and support the change effort in general. And sometimes there will be people who say, no, I'm not interested in change. I like the status quo as it is. And actually have a vested interest that the status quo is preserved, because maybe I have a lot of equity in my network I built over the last 10 years here, and I don't want the process to change. And so there's so many examples of this kind of behavior, particularly in larger organizations. Imagine the classic thing, whenever organizations in technology have a sales force, for example, it is rather often the case that as a product team, you're not allowed to talk directly to customers, which is nightmarish, because there will always be someone in between the people who you like to help in a way that also serves the organization and and yourself. That there will always be something lost in translation, because some intermediary is trying to convey messages here, and this is simply not working. So what can we do about this? Sometimes it's about the salespeople being afraid that our developers talking to customers would ruin any form of future sales, because they have no clue what to sell to the customers, where to be silent and where to double down or something like that. They're really afraid of that. And I can understand this. If your remuneration largely depends on your bonus, if you're meeting your numbers, you do not want a hoodie-wearing nerd to screw that up. So we need to find different ways how to deal with that. And typically, it only works if you have the support of the leadership level. Bottom-up initiatives, I've seen so many started and so many failed. It never works out in my experience.
Bottom-up is very unlikely to work. And the core what you said for me is you need to pick your fights. Because if you try to fight everything, then it will be very unlikely you can move. So if you pick the fight, and as you said, progress a little bit, help them see, and you need to convince that the change is worth with results. Because one of the challenges I see is about trying to lecture the others why it is better to do the other way. And sometimes I make the classic analogy: you go to the top of the mountain and you keep shouting, "Here's so great, come here, let's talk about this," and so on. But no, you need to meet them where they are and help them progress step by step, and be aware that this is a journey. It's going to take some time. It's not something that you can change from 1 month to the other. We're most probably talking about years.
Yes, absolutely. It's really a marathon. It's not a sprint. No pun intended.
Yeah. And when it comes to product ownership, product owners face many challenges. First is about understanding what a product owner is. Not gonna go into that. For me, it's someone driving value. But the product owners will receive a huge amount of pressure from the leadership or from other stakeholders to deliver more. There will be always more to do than capacity. So this is something product owners will have to deal with. And it's easy to fall into anti-patterns in this case. What are things that product owners should be aware of?
The question of the product ownership is a challenging one from several perspectives. So we all know John Cutler's idea of the feature factory we would like to escape. Martin Kagan has something similar, the feature team that is basically subservient to the business and just delivers features that have been requested for them, and the more the better. All of this is really not agile as we would like to be. agile in the sense that, okay, what is the most pressing problem we try to solve at the moment? Yeah, how can our work be most beneficial both to our customers as well as to our organization? And there are a few things that come to mind. Just pushing for shipping more stuff, for example, to catch up with competition or take them, really does not help. We're in a complex environment. Shipping more lines of code, another feature, does not mean that we create value. We're not assembling Model Ts or refrigerators here, where you can say, okay, if we manage to ship one more unit to the wholesaler, we actually make money. This is not the case in our situation typically. What are the issues? Not putting emphasis on a high technical standard. So business agility requires two things from my perspective. A, you need to understand what the next big thing is. So you need to really be invested in product discovery and figuring out, okay, what is most valuable for your customers. But on the other side, you also need to be able to actually follow up on that. It doesn't matter if you're really excellent at figuring out what the next big thing is. If you have a tanker that cannot change course because it's riddled with technical debt, and you actually cannot move anymore, where you come to a situation where you do not like to touch anything because you don't know what's going to break. So it's really tricky. So ignoring the technical health of your platform is really a serious anti-pattern here. Not including your team members in coming up with solutions. So I don't understand why people still have this idea that they can hand down a request to the engineers and then expect that exactly the right thing will be built, that is solving a customer problem. This is complete nonsense. First of all, we don't know what is requested is really helpful in that respect. Secondly, there might be another way of doing things. And the people who know best about how technology works are the engineers. So it should be common sense that the engineers are talking to the customers, that the engineers are observing what the customers are doing, that the engineers try to understand what the issue here is. It's not my job as a product owner to tell the engineers what to do. It's my job to guide them in the right direction so that we as a team, as a collective, can come up with the best solution from all perspectives. So same applies to product backlog management. I mean, this is seriously, it's a collective exercise here. Yes, the product owner is accountable on paper, and I do believe someone needs to be the directly responsible individual in the end. However, everything else is a collective exercise. So particularly Scrum, and a lot of people do not understand that Scrum is featured with a very delicate checks and balance system. Scrum is remarkably egalitarian. No one has any authority to tell anyone else what to do, how to do this, when to do this. You all need to work together. So product owner owns the product backlog. Sprint backlog is owned by the developers. This is it. Product owner has the prerogative to explain what the business goal of the next sprint is supposed to be. What is most valuable? That's the job. Figuring out that is the job of the product owner. However, the sprint goal is then collectively created by everyone on the team. And the developers commit to it. And because of that, they are allowed to pick the work to make this happen. So it's a system designed to avoid that one set of people tell another set of people what they have to do. Because this is not working in a complex environment. At least not in my experience.
No, it doesn't work. And curious enough, it's still how many product owners are working like that, telling developers what to do and creating timelines when some things get done. It is a very complicated job and complex for product owner to do, because there is the pressure from stakeholders. And as you said, you You need to understand what is the next thing to do, follow up on that while keeping the application sustainable, empowering developers to make the decisions on what to build, like kind of a lead by context, not by control. It is very difficult to do that, but it's necessary. And looking at the real world examples, I'm curious if you have any story from your experience or your research where identifying an anti-pattern and solving it changed the project outcome.
My favorite example is more than 10 years old, but it's still funny. So my team was working really intensively to reduce the load time of the homepage, and it was a very competitive market, and we really had to work on this. And then one Monday morning, we came back and looked at the logs, and it turned out that the load time has significantly increased over the weekend, and we had no clue what was happening. There were no indications what was going on. Shortly after that, we actually figured out what happened. Our most senior developer integrated a third JavaScript framework into the application. It was brand new, and he wanted to see how it was working with the higher traffic. So that was really fun. So we agreed on rolling back this unilateral decision and use it as a good reason to talk about how to deal with those situations in the future. So how can we actually set up an environment that would allow us to, for example, divert a bit part of the traffic to see how some technology would be working out. So it was really a valuable lesson for everyone involved, and it never happened again. And so we just had a laugh afterwards about the whole incident. It was nothing big, and in the end, it was a good way of learning.
That's quite interesting. Yeah, it is about a learning from the situation, right? I had a little bit more tragic situation, a bit similar. We struggled, it was an e-commerce, we struggled with the image processing time. So whenever our suppliers would send product updates, our image processing would take too long, then the product would get live, like after hours. And we had to solve that. And during a weekend, I don't know what happened during the weekend. Sometimes software developers are creative. Someone decided to take the weekend to solve this problem, and the person solved the problem and put it live. When I arrived in the office on Monday, and then we received the batch of updates, something started happening a bit different. Products started going out of the website. Instead of going to the website, they started going out. The more updates we received, the more products went out. And then I had the director of marketplace calling me, David, whatever happened, just stop it. And I didn't know what happened, and nobody knew what happened. And nobody was saying anything. Then, long story short, we removed 50,000 products from the website. And then the software engineer raised a hand. I actually improved the algorithm of compacting and so on. And then we said, how did you come to this? It was not even there. So we learned one thing, that it's very important to share what you were doing and ensure that someone at least have a look at that. So ensure we create value. So the situation was tragic. It led to people working until 2 a.m. or to fix this and so on. But it was a lot of learning after that. We improved our collaboration. So there was no blame game because we had a space where we could talk and so on. But of course, as a product owner, I had to talk to the angry business stakeholders who wanted to, let's say, have me for breakfast.
And that's part of the job too, right? So it's not fun, but hey,
that is part of the job.
Take one for the team, right?
Yeah, I always tell the team, when we succeed together. When we fail, I take the blame because it means that I didn't give the context right, something happened, so I'm ultimately accountable for the results. So I need to ensure that I give you the right context to make the right decisions. I don't need to check everything, it's right. No, but I need to give the right context.
Yes.
As a product owner.
it's also a good principle if something goes wrong. First of all, observe what is going on, and then ask yourself, how may I have contributed to the current situation? And most of the time you will figure out, okay, maybe I have a share in this thing, right?
Yes. Whenever I reflected, it was very unlikely I wouldn't find my share.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk to you about agile transformation.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that I see that some companies are losing faith in doing that, and some companies are still trying to figure out how to make it possible. But one very important aspect, there will be common pitfalls on trying to do an agile transformation. I want to understand these common pitfalls and how your book helps prevent them.
Well, the book is not directly addressing anti-patterns that result from agile transformations. However, the topic is scattered all over the book. We'll find it in a lot of different anti-patterns, and to one way or another, to a certain extent. So if I were to summarize my takeaway from writing the book, I would say there are a few behaviors that come to mind that are not helpful if you want to have a successful agile transformation. Well, obviously, the first one is that you fail to explain why becoming agile would benefit the individual team member and as well as the organization. You need to answer the "what is in for me" question. And there are always people who are not interested in shouldering more responsibilities, who say, hey, I'm trading here time for money. I come in at 9 o'clock in the morning. I leave at 6 in the afternoon. I have a lunch break. You can tell me what I'm supposed to do in this time box, and I'm fine with that. I'm not judging anyone, and if that is working for many people, I'm fine with that. But there are other people who really would like to know, okay, why do I have to chip in more? Why do I have to accept more responsibilities here? And what is the upside of this? What certainly is not helpful is outsourcing the transformation to a large consultancy. So a top-down rollout, like introducing a new piece of business software or something like that. This is not how it works. So agile transformations are so deeply embedded in the cultural fabric of the organization. You really need to do this yourself. So they might. Outsiders and outside consultancy might be helpful because they have experience with other organizations, hopefully how this works, but in most cases they certainly will know what is not working, and that can be helpful, but you can't outsource it completely. It doesn't work. Classic failure you always see is that organizations fail to invest in educating all people. So all the people who are part of the transformation effort. You need to help them understand what is going on. You need to help them educate themselves and be educated with their colleagues. There's no way out of that. Certain issue I've observed in some organizations is that the outside consultancy is selling becoming agile with cost cuttings because you supposedly lose or no longer need certain management levels. And of course, this is not a good idea to say, okay, the transformation will pay for itself by cutting jobs. So this is I think a major failure on the side of many organizations. You need to state that there is job security but no role security, because otherwise you're violating rule number one. Answer the question, what is in for me? Of course, classic is always that the leadership is not leading, because they're outsourcing something, either to the lieutenants or to some outsider, an outside consultancy. And this is, leadership, it's really about leading. You need to be at the front. You need to explain to everyone all the time why this is necessary, why it is beneficial, how you can help them, etc. It never stops. you're really on campaign here as a leader. And if you don't do that, don't expect anyone else to follow.
Yeah.
Typically, you will see that 10-15% of the people in an organization are potential change agents. They like the idea, they embrace change, they want change, and they ask, okay, how can I be a part of that? There will be probably 5 to 10% people I like to call refuseniks, who say, no, I don't want change because I prefer the status quo for various personal reasons. I have a vested interest in that status quo. And all the others will just stand by and watch and see how the dice roll and where they fall. And then, only then, they will decide whether they participate or not. And if I can mention the sixth one that is dear to my heart, failing to create a failure culture. I mean, we're working in a complex environment, or for the Star Trekkies among us, we basically go every day somewhere where we've never been before. And it's not a question if we fail, but only when we fail. It will happen. And the question always is, how can we learn from failure? And I believe that learning from failure is mission critical if you want to be successful in this business. And you need to have a failure culture for that. It needs to be okay to fail. So the big utility I mentioned at the beginning, for example, had this strange way of promoting people that required that you do not have failed projects on your CV, so to speak. And at the same time, they were complaining about, the inertia in the organization, that people were not willing to take risks. And I thought to myself, maybe there's a causation between these two, right? So failure nights, for example, are always a good way, and laughing about yourself and sharing your failures. You may recall this famous Nike sport with Michael Jordan. I failed over and over and over again in my life, and that's why I succeed. And this is exactly what it's all about. So if you do not have a failure culture, don't expect that your transformation will go well.
Yeah, about failures, it's really very important. It's like Alexander Osterwalder said in his book, The Invincible Company. Avoid big failures or you're dead. Embrace small failures or you're dead. So the question, as I said, when? There will be failures. We just need to shorten the time so we can see it and we can correct course. And one question that you mentioned is often very overlooked. What is in it for me when you go for transformation? Generally, we're going to go do a transformation. We start working with Scrum or something else right now. But what is in it for me? Not always is answered. I have seen many transformations now, but I have not seen this question being so important. And it's true. Many people doubt and say, I don't know why this is happening. I don't know why I'm doing that. And then starts the protection with my job was that. And the point you said, I see it's kind of fundamental as it's job security, but no role security. So you're going to change, but you will remain here, but the role will be something else. And that's not always clear. And many times it goes to the outsourcing, as you said, somebody else. And leadership, instead of being in front of everyone doing the campaign, this is why we're doing that. And that's where we want to be. They outsource to another consultancy, and consultancy may have the goal, of course, of leading a transformation, but they also have different goals in leadership. So they will do what they are paid for.
Always
complex. Yes.
And they also, typically they're billing based on time and material. They want to sell as much time as possible.
Yes.
Don't forget that.
Exactly. It's complex because they have a different business. One of the parts we talked about, Marty Kagan, he says, like, if you want to implement what he calls as the product operating model, leadership needs to stand in front of everyone, and they cannot outsource. They cannot put someone else in charge. They need to be in charge of that. If they are not, they're not going to see the change they envision. So it will be kind of half-baked change. Mm-hmm. But when we look at team dynamics, because one of the things I have been always saying, in the end of the day, it is about people and collaboration. If we don't learn how to work with each other, it's not gonna create what we envision. But it's easy to have internal issues within the team, and that doesn't get solved, and then it contributes to low morale and other things. How do you suggest to bring these issues to the table and start solving them?
Okay, number one on my list is always is observe and listen. So you never know from the outside why things are the way they are, and there's always a reason why the situation currently is the way it is. So observe, listen, and avoid jumping to conclusions. That is a good start. Of course, we like to embrace this idea of psychological safety, which you can't switch on or can't create or can't initiate that easily. It takes a lot of time, and also it depends on the culture of the organization, right? So I fully understand in some organizations why people do not speak out openly, no matter how much radical candor books they're reading, because that's speaking out loud is a career limiting step in several or many organizations. You can't afford this if you have to make ends meet, for example. So encouraging an open atmosphere certainly ranks high on the list, but don't be disappointed if it's not working right away. I mentioned failure culture. So my point will always be to help everyone understand why embracing failure is a necessary step in the learning process. We'll always point to how little children learn. If you observe how little children use their running bikes or learn to go with their first bikes and so on, I mean, they fail so often, and nevertheless they get up again and they try it again. And you want to support this process and not stifle it by telling everyone, no, you're not supposed to fail. Stop. Well, that's not working. Ask as a leader how you can support the team. So do you have everything that you need to be successful? For example, is the toolbox filled? Do you have every tool that you need to be successful? Do you have all the skills that you need? I know training people is unpopular, it's an expense, and you have no clue when there will be a return on investment. And even if there is one in the long run, you can't really come up with a number here. So there's no way to win an Excel sheet based battle here. But it's really mission critical. How can you suppose that people solve a problem if they do not have the skills, right? What processes are impeding your progress? What processes would you preserve? And what processes would you kill right out of or immediately because they really do not support your team's mission and they're blocking your way. And what absolutely is critical in my experience is that you take retrospective seriously, not just at the team level, but also in regular intervals with your stakeholders. Because there are so many teams that consider their stakeholders to be, I wouldn't say an opponent, but somewhere, but the party on the other side. Instead of including them in the problem-solving approach that they are pursuing. So make the stakeholders part of the solution. Life becomes so much easier. And the first step in that direction could be that you actually have regular stakeholder retrospectives. Just invite them, talk to them. Okay, how can we improve collectively? What is going on? It's really trivial. It's not rocket science. And while you're at it, consider that you invite them for user story mappings. So still one of my preferred tools to actually create rapport and trust with stakeholders. the moment you manage to change your relationship with your stakeholders, life becomes so much easier as a team, because now it's not us versus them. It's now we as a enlarged collective trying to solve a problem.
Yes.
Makes it so much easier, in my experience.
No, I connect very much with it. I like saying that the stakeholders, the business stakeholders precisely,
Yes.
they are not your customers, but they are also not your enemies. They are your partners. So this line is very important. Last week I had a talk with Martin, and he shared one thing very interesting. He said, it's very important to build a relationship with the business stakeholders before you need them, because then it will be more natural. So in terms of collaboration, I like what you're saying here in this direction of involving more the stakeholders, integrating them more on the creating the product. So it's everyone together. This is very important. And the other part you said resonated a lot with me is in terms of leadership. It's a question you ask, right? Because many young leaders, they think they need to provide answers. So this is what you should do next. This is what you do here. So in this case, you are not leading, you are managing. So it's a different scenario you're doing. But if you ask a question like, how can I support you? Then you force the employee to reflect what is missing on my side. And I'm not being told what to do. I'm being asked where I need support. Is a very different way of work on the team dynamics. It's very important. And if the leader manages to give the support being asked, that will lead to appreciation. So, I'm being heard. So what I say, it's taken seriously. So that drives to a different kind of morale in the team. Very interesting this. And these questions, I'm not sure how often they are asked. Simple questions, but very powerful.
It's very often the simple stuff that helps, so don't make it so complicated.
Yes. Yeah.
Just be a mensch and don't pretend that you know all the answers, because you don't, and everyone knows that you don't. So
that's true. That's totally true. And in a scenario, let's say the teams understood their anti-patterns, they understood processes that are getting in the way, they understood what they have to change. How can they measure that they are getting to the other side? They are really improving. How can they measure that?
Okay, I mean the obvious metrics are the classic hard metrics, like okay, the churn rate was reduced, the basket size increased, NPS scores went up, the average order size increased, the cost overhead per order was reduced, etc. pp. But there are other metrics that signs that allow us to understand that people become better at what they do and that they start to overcome the anti-patterns that they may have encountered before. So, for example, I like to put a lot of emphasis on everyone understanding the big picture, from product vision to delivering increments. Okay, what is the path here? Why are we going down there? Where do we start, and where is it that we might end up? And by the way, what kind of metrics are important here? I mean, it always puzzled me how few teams know actually the basic metrics of their business. So how much does the team cost? How much revenue is our part making, or something like that? And what is the gross margin that we have? The moment you provide these numbers to everyone on the team, you will see that the decision process changes and people become significantly more entrepreneurial as far as decisions are concerned. The same applies if you include developers early in the product discovery activities. I mean, this should be a no-brainer because they are the people who actually cover the feasibility part. They are the techies, but nevertheless, often it's forgotten. And this is the one thing I would really start considering as soon as possible. So whenever I had the chance, I invited my developers to participate in product discovery, participate in user interviews, be fully immersed and part of that whole process. I always try to
Mhm.
explain to them, your job is not to write as much code as possible. Your job is, first of all, to figure out what is worth building and then do so with as little code as possible. Yes. Um, of course, there will always be some people who enjoy writing a lot of code. What else is helping to understand whether they started overcoming anti-patterns? Regularly delivering valuable increments is absolutely um, mission critical because it allows us to close the build, measure, learn loop, and it builds rapport and trust with our stakeholders. That is
Mhm.
very, very helpful. And as a result, you will also see that our stakeholders are now actually taking us seriously and flock to sprint reviews, retrospectives, or your product review, or whatever you like to call these kind of events. Um, a good, encouraging sign of teams understanding where they failed in the past is if they have a short, actionable product backlog. You know, if they get rid of these 500, 600, 1,000 items thingies in Jira that no one can handle anyway. You know, always try to tell people, the trash bin is your friend. You know, if there's something in your backlog that hasn't been touched for 3 months, you throw it away. You know, because no one is interested in that. And if it's important, they come back anyway. And after 3 months, you can't use the old stuff because we're in a complex environment and it all very likely will be outdated anyway. Huh? So yeah, that would be another thing. And just to close the thoughts, I I feel confident that my team is catching up when they really start paying attention to the technical quality, when they put effort into their definition of done, if they really are starting to think entrepreneurially about the level of necessary quality to help the team preserve their ability to actually change direction in the
Yeah,
future. That's another critical point from my perspective.
it's a great ways of seeing how to measure the progress and understand the team is moving. Of course, you need to understand where you started, right? And you can see how the team is evolving. And one aspect that I like is bringing the metrics to the team, because a lot of people like saying we pay gold for engineers, they need to be productive. But engineers sometimes don't even know the cost of the team. They don't even know what they create. Share that with them, and you can be quite surprised. As you said, people will become more entrepreneurial once they know the big picture. Because it's easy, like the others just keep saying this, yeah, they're expensive and so on. All right, help them understand what is the value, and then they can be more creative. Because just saying they are expensive, that doesn't help. And now I want to talk to you about the polemic topic, which is a lot of people say, yeah, Scrum is dead. There's no more need for that. We need to move on. Some people say Agile is dead. Everything is dead because we know best, right? What to do and so on. And in your perspective, what is the future of Scrum? How is this going to develop? What is the use of that? How do you take that?
Mhm. The future of Scrum. Oh, that is interesting. So I like to explain to the students in my Scrum classes that we do not get paid to practice Scrum. No? But we get paid to solve our customers' problems within the given constraints while we contribute to the organization's sustainability. Um, and so far, I'm quite optimistic. Um, I mean, in my experience, very few companies use Scrum in the way it is intended to be used. More or less, you see some sort of derivative of Scrum, you know, some way of working that contains Scrum elements, which is totally fine. You know, steal from Scrum whatever you want if it helps you and to create products and solve customer problems. Awesome, do this. Um, so in that respect, by all means, I believe that Scrum will continue to flourish, but probably not under the label of Scrum. Um, so I think if if I recall the recent State of Agile report correctly, so more and more people more and organizations are considering to move towards their own way of doing things, which I believe is a very very common way of doing things. Some people say, okay, Scrum is good as training wheels, but the moment the team has a good understanding of problem and solution space, they will come up with their own way of doing things. And I said, yeah, well, probably a good idea. So you will start to tweak the framework anyway, and you have to. I mean, it's a deliberately incomplete framework. You have to come up with some solutions how to make it work in your context. So in that respect, I'm optimistic. What we probably have seen, though, is this peak Scrum certification age. So I seriously, I mean, I put a lot of effort into my classes, but I don't believe that attending a 2-day class from me will make you a Scrum Master that is, capable of supporting a Scrum team. It takes significantly more to do that. And actually, that's a good trend from my perspective.
It's quite interesting, this part, what you say here. Really love this aspect of, we don't get paid to play Scrum. We get paid to solve customer problem, create value for customers. So that is a mentality. And the part of use Scrum as a means to create value. If we have this mindset, then we can benefit. Because, yeah, I agree with you. There was a huge hype there on the certificate and so on. And then now we're moving Scrum to the way teams can adapt or use as training if they want. But the thing about Scrum that I like is it helps you have room for the right things to happen. So if you use the room correctly, then you can benefit. But if you use incorrectly, then you're going to struggle. But always start with the mindset. It's not about doing Scrum better. It's about driving value for customers sooner. That's the most important.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Cool. And now to come up to the end of this talk here, anything you want to leave the audience with, any personal insight, anything you would like to leave us?
That's interesting. What would that be? I don't believe that these Cassandra calls of Agile is dead, Scrum is dead are true. I mean, this is more or less our little bubble in which we are moving, and it's the usual conversation that we have and with a frightening regularity and periodicity, and I really believe this is not the case. We will always face uncertainty, and we'll face complex situations where we don't know what the right product is. And until someone shows me a better way of working, Agile will always be my first choice. And everything fails, just read the manual, and that means the one-pager of the Agile Manifesto and the few additional pages of the Scrum guide. That really helps. And I would stick with that.
Great answer. Yeah, this claims Scrum is dead, Agile is dead. I like saying that maybe people need to reflect and say how I practice Scrum didn't work, how I practice Agile didn't work. Because sentence like, it is dead. Dead for whom? There are different variations of this, different way of applying. So I think it's important to look in the mirror and say, maybe how I practice didn't work. It's a little bit different. So far, I agree with you. I haven't seen a better way of working. So if someone gives me a better way of working, I'm all for that. That's all right. Let's try it.
Absolutely.
Good.
Like Edison used to say, I didn't fail. I just found 10,000 times how it's not working.
So Stefan, how should people connect to you? Where should they reach out to know more about it?
Oh, that's simple. You can Google me, and I'm quite active on LinkedIn. So you will find me there too. And just reach out to me. So that's not much of a problem.
Perfect. So I will leave the links and everything so you can find newsletter, book, and his LinkedIn profile. So Stefan, thanks a lot for all of your insights. And for everyone watching, don't forget, if you want to benefit from Scrum, you should know not only how to play the game, but how not to, and what are the anti-patterns, so you can increase your chance of thriving. So thanks everyone, and let's rock the product world together.